Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I am Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us. Hey, listen, I am shooting this video really late. I'm going to be editing it even later. And I do want to apologize. My voice is partially gone. My college football team gave me 3 hours and 55 minutes worth of great stuff. The problem was the game was 4 hours long, but I digress. Listen, I have a really urgent update, and it has to do with the world of triggers. And no, I'm not talking about a forced reset trigger. No, I'm not talking about a wide open trigger. I'm talking about something new, and I have some very important information that I kind of got directly from somebody from this company. So we're going to spend a few minutes tonight and talk about urgent update. The ATF adds the Hellfire trigger to their most wanted list. Okay, so the issue we're talking about tonight, and I'll get it edited so we can all catch up on this in the morning, is the ATF now has added to their trigger most wanted list the Hellfire trigger system. Now, for those of you who are not even familiar with this, and I'll be candid with you, I was not that familiar with the system until I was called today by a representative of the company. And I had a long conversation with the representative of the company who told me that one of their distribution centers had a search warrant served on it back in July, and hundreds of these trigger devices were confiscated by the ATF. And now the upper management of this company has received this little handy-dandy cease and desist letter, which I will go over with some of it with you this evening. But we need to be aware, because we know what a headache the forced reset trigger has caused people. We know what a headache the wide open trigger has caused people. And now we can add perhaps the Hellfire trigger system to this. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with what the Hellfire trigger system does, and I was one of them, well, let's just go straight to the tape.
The installation of the Stealth Hellfire is quite easy. Install the main screw by holding it all together, and then making sure the springs don't fall out. Install the main screw, and then tighten the what I do is I hold the handle. You can grip right here pretty tight. You can put your thumb on the side like this, or rest your thumb on the safety to give room enough for the rifle to kick back and forth. And then you just lightly squeeze the trigger of the gun. So that I give myself a little room, lightly squeeze the gun's trigger. And that's all there is to it.
Now, as near as I can understand it, this is a system which is installed inside the pistol grip and then uses magnets to help the trigger operate in a manner obviously quicker than what is capable with the normal human hand. Now, we know how ATF has come down on forced reset triggers, wide open triggers, and yes, they have come down the same way now on this Hellfire trigger system. Okay, now the cease and desist letter to the company, which is Firequest, based out of Colorado. And as I mentioned, there was a distribution center of theirs in Arkansas that was already served with, oh, that's right, a search warrant. That's right, signed by a federal judge. Now, let's go through this cease and desist letter, because I want you to understand where the ATF is coming down on it. This is what it states. This letter pertains to the Hellfire Gen 2 and the Hellfire Gen 2 AR trigger devices manufactured and sold by your company. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives evaluated the Hellfire Gen 2 and the Hellfire Gen 2 AR trigger devices and determined each to be a machine gun as defined under the Gun Control Act of 1968 and the National Firearms Act. And yes, I did have an opportunity to read the search warrant, and yes, agents did purchase these devices, did several experiments, and yes, the data from those experiments are in fact listed in the search warrant. Now, am I saying that the data is accurate? I'm not saying any of that. I am saying that that data has been supplied in the search warrant. Now, the cease and desist letter goes on to state, The Gun Control Act and the National Firearms Act define the term machine gun in relevant part as any weapon which shoots, is designed to shoot, or can be readily restored to shoot automatically more than one shot without manual reloading by a single function of the trigger. The term shall also include any part designed and intended solely and exclusively or combination of parts designed and intended for use in converting a weapon into a machine gun. And that language right there is exactly where ATF hung their hats as it relates to the force reset trigger and the wide open trigger. The letter then states, ATF has determined that the trigger devices are parts designed and intended solely and exclusively for use in converting a weapon into a machine gun. Therefore, the trigger devices are themselves machine guns as defined by the Gun Control Act and the National Firearms Act. The cease and desist letter then goes on to list all of the statutory violations that this company could be in violation and all the penalties, but of course also mentions that because these are defined not only as firearms standing alone, but NFA regulated firearms, machine guns, standing alone, that not only would the transfer of these items be unlawful, but so would the possession of these items as well. Now, finally, the cease and desist letter states very specific instructions to this company, and I want everyone to be aware of this. The letter states, because the manufacture, possession, and transfer of these trigger devices by your company fail to comply with the provisions of the Gun Control Act and the National Firearm Act, you must immediately take the following actions to comply with the law and cooperate. Number 1, cease and desist your manufacture, sale, or transfer of Hellfire Gen 2 and Hellfire Gen 2 AR trigger devices. 2, surrender any Hellfire Gen 2 and Hellfire Gen 2 AR trigger devices in your possession to ATF. Any Hellfire Gen 2 or Hellfire Gen 2 AR trigger devices that is returned to you by a third party must also be surrendered to the ATF. Now, number 3 is really important because here's what else ATF is stating. Number 3, notify customers of the Hellfire Gen 2 and Hellfire Gen 2 AR trigger devices that these devices have been classified by ATF as machine guns under federal law and to contact ATF to coordinate the abandonment or destruction of the trigger devices. Maintain and provide ATF a record of when and how you notified customers as outlined above. So yes, the company is ordered to notify you so that you can notify the ATF and they can come over and make arrangements for them, of course, to take possession of your property. And then apparently, because they must be running out of triggers to find on their national scavenger hunt, the last thing that Firequest is ordered to do by this cease and desist letter is 5. Within 5 days after your receipt of this letter, contact ATF to develop a plan for retrieval of the unregistered Hellfire Gen 2 and Hellfire Gen 2 AR trigger devices that you already transferred. Develop a plan means they're going to ask for all the sales and shipping records. Now, like I said, I talked to a representative of the company. I'm not going to tell you who that is. I do not know what their plans are. I did advise those people they needed to get attorneys immediately in their home state. They are not a Washington-based company, so I have very limited involvement in this other than the information. But I do have a copy of the cease and desist letter. I do have a copy of the search warrant that was served on the distributorship in Arkansas back in July, and a list of all the inventory of the items that were taken, a very large 3400.23, where we're talking about close to 1,000 trigger devices. So, what does this mean? Well, we're going to do more videos on this as we learn more, and I have to have time to go through all of this and figure out what all of this means. But if you do have one of these Hellfire trigger devices and you geek out on this channel, you are out now on notice that ATF has turned their attention towards these. I do believe this may go down in quite a similar fashion as it did with the forced reset trigger, as it did with the wide open trigger, as it did with these solvent traps. I do believe that this is another situation. So we'll be doing more videos about what to anticipate, what's really happening, and what you can do if you decide to get out in front of this, or what you can do if you decide, no, I'm going to dig my heels in on this is a hill that is worth dying on for me. In the meantime, I know you'll have more questions about your Second Amendment rights or what's left of them. And if you do, remember, you can always contact us at WashingtonGunLaw.com, or you can call us directly at 425-765-0487. Now, let's remember, even at this late time of night, the only way that you can be the lawful and responsible gun owner, like we preach all the time here at Washington Gun Law, is to know what the law is in every situation and how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. Until next time, thanks for watching. Stay safe.